You imagine yourself to be a person. The universal observer. Who are you? Ultimately, you are the undifferentiated consciousness of the void. That is the underlying truth of you. That is the true nature of your being, which can be called the beingness of consciousness or the nothingness of being. That nothingness of being is what exists when everything else disappears from existence. That is ultimately what you are. What is yourself? Yourself is a point of consciousness that arises at the central point of view of the holographic world you perceive. That point of consciousness is what is perceiving that world from its own central point of view and illuminating that world with the light of consciousness. That point of consciousness is what is animating that world with the energy of its own motion relative to the motionless void. That point of consciousness is what is creating that world due to its own accelerated motion relative to the motionless void, which gives rise to its event horizon that becomes its holographic screen when qubits of information are encoded on the horizon. An accelerating observer's event horizon. Quantized bit of information. The holographic principle. That creation process can only go forward because the individual consciousness of that point of consciousness is differentiating itself from the undifferentiated consciousness of the void as that point of consciousness begins to move relative to the motionless void and its own holographic world appears to come into existence. What is imagination? Imagination is composed of the projected and animated images of a holographic virtual reality movie that's being displayed on an observer's holographic screen. The observer, the screen, and its object of perception. The images are observed by the observer of the images, which is the point of consciousness at the central point of view of its own holographic world, as the images are projected from the observer's screen to its central point of view. The projected images are all forms of information that are reducible to qubits of information encoded on the screen and are animated in the flow of energy that arises from the energy of the observer's own motion relative to the motionless void. What is a person? A person is the central form of information that appears in the observer's own holographic world. That personal form is emotionally animated relative to all other forms that appear in the observer's holographic world. The observer is emotionally identifying itself with that emotionally animated personal form due to feelings of emotional self-limitation to that personal form. The observer not only perceives the form of things, but also the flow of emotional energy that animates the form of things, which leads to feelings of personal self-limitation and to personal self-identification. This is an example of personal imagination that arises because the observer is emotionally disconnecting itself from all other forms that appear in its world. This emotional disconnection occurs when the observer thinks about itself in a personal way. When the observer thinks about itself in a personal way, the observer imagines itself to be a person. When the observer emotionally identifies itself with a personal form, it emotionally disconnects itself from all other forms and feels disconnected because it imagines itself to be a person. Please visit the Science and Non-Duality WordPress website.